Conservative MP for Wimbledon since 2005, Stephen Hammond. Great to chat to you today. Tell me when you first knew you were a Conservative.
I guess quite early on in many ways, but I didn't really do very much about it politically until after university. I mean, when I was at school, I was fascinated by an event in Australia where the Queen's representative chucked out the government. And, at that stage it thought to me, this is very odd. How does politics work? What's it there for? How should a country be run? And how do we make the best for any country? So I started to think about it, when I was in my mid-teens, but really only got actively involved after I'd left university. And then I was running someone else's election campaign, and someone came to talk. Actually, Ken Clarke came to talk for this chap. And afterwards he said to me, what are you doing wasting your time organising it? You should be running. And it was at that point I thought, actually, this is what I want to do with my life. So for me, it was a process of evolution, not revolution.
OK. You've been in the news lately. A number of MPs were approached by a fake South Korean company, which was part of a campaign led by donkeys. You were one of them. Just tell me what happened in your own words.
Well, what happened was a process that I got an email saying, we're an advisory board, we're looking to set up an advisory board, we're a group of manufacturing companies, we've got a number of interesting clients. I looked at their website, which was there, they'd set up a fake website. They came back to me and said, would I be interested in a preliminary interview? I think that for a lot of us who have worked in the commercial world, it's not unusual to get approached by people and have a very preliminary invitation. I made it very clear I wouldn't break any parliamentary rules. I made it very clear that it was up for them to decide what they wanted to pay. I mean, I think the two things I've learned out of this are, one is that I don't really regard these people as journalists. I regard them as scam merchants who, if they'd done that to my constituents, I'd be on to the ICO trying to make sure that they were shut down. Because actually, the story here was we tried to scam someone. They said they're not going to break any rules, not going to break the spirit of any rules. Now, it's perfectly legitimate, I think, to say MPs shouldn't have second jobs, but it's not legitimate to break data protection rules. And I think that is the real story here as well.
Do you think MPs should be able to have second jobs?
I think it's something we should debate in the modern world. At the moment we are. I think there's a great benefit. I think the problem is that 3 weeks before this all happened, I actually went to see the Commissioner myself, because the new rules that Chris Bryant has introduced are really quite opaque, very difficult to understand. So I wanted to understand what the rules are so I wouldn't break any. So I'd actually been to see the Commissioner beforehand. I think that, if you say MPs aren't going to have second jobs, it's going to be really tricky for the Labour Party. Don't see how anyone can be a member of a trade union and an MP, because you're only there to advocate for your members. So I think it's a really tricky area, and I think we should have a debate about it. Really interesting, one of your colleagues, you will know, and I won't name him now, an old lefty, said to me in the lift on the Monday after that thing, he said, I don't hold with MPs having second jobs. He said, but what those people did to you and some of your colleagues, who you clearly weren't breaking the rules, was a disgrace.
Interesting take. I guess what will have been surprising to many people watching that was the sort of figures that were involved. People are struggling at the moment, that, we all know that. And when former cabinet ministers are saying my day rate is £10,000 a day, it just seems such a million miles away from this planet.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why I was very clear that I didn't ask for a particular sum of money. It was up to them to do that. And I think several people have remarked to me that was a big difference. I absolutely agree that it looks a huge, and that's why we should have that discussion. I also think it's really, I know I've made mistakes in politics. We all make mistakes, and I'm sure I've made enough. But I've always tried to do things honestly and to act from the best of my condition. And I suppose I took it very hard that my reputation had been completely traduced for having done nothing wrong.
Okay. Now you are on the moderate wing of the Tories you talked about. Hearing from Ken Clarke, I'm sure, is a hero of yours. The immigration bill, it's back in Parliament next week, it's the illegal immigration bill. Now, you have previously said that you want assurances on that. There will be amendments that are put down by some of your colleagues who are anxious about what Suella Braverman wants to introduce. What do you think you'll do next week? What are you looking for? What assurances do you need?
Well, I think I don't think there's anyone who's really against the principle of stopping illegal immigration. The question, as you well know, is there's illegal immigration, there's economic migrancy, and there's asylum. And I want to be able to be reassured, and there are a number of amendments going down, a number of which I will back, about, first of all, on the whole asylum issue, which is ensuring that there are safe and legal routes for people to get here, recognising also that we probably should row back from what the government has said about modern slavery, rules not being applied here, because there were some people who will be trafficked illegally, who will be subject to modern slavery, what we would call modern slavery, if they've been coming in another way. So I want to see some discretion there. I also want to ensure that the government is making adequate provision for under 18-year-olds in terms of making sure they're properly looked after, recognise that they are more vulnerable than others. And so there are a number of amendments and a number of things down. The government at committee stage, as you know, sought to reassure, and I'm aware that two of my colleagues who are leading on these groups of amendments have been talking to the government fairly heavily. But I think it's really important that we maintain our reputation, that if you are under threat from persecution because of your religious, political, sexual orientation or whatever, the UK will offer you a home.
Now, just to briefly explain the parliamentary process, so some MPs will try and amend the government's proposals. They may not have the numbers. You will sign it, you will vote for it, but you may not have the numbers to get it through. Could you see a scenario where you don't vote for the proposals in their current form if the amendments along the lines that you suggest are not part of the proposals?
We should explain the parliamentary process better, because a lot of it is negotiation and to get to a point, and sometimes you don't get to the perfect ending. But I am clear that I want to see the government accept some of those amendments next week, and then if I don't get that, I am prepared for the first time for a very long time to vote against the government on those.
Thank you for being so clear on that. You did fall out with your party over Brexit. You are pro-European. You serve as the deputy chair of the Conservative European Forum, which advocates closer relationship with Europe. What, in your view, should Britain be doing that it isn't doing at the moment?
Well, the first thing is that the European Forum is a group that wants to strengthen our relationships both at a national level, but obviously, as you say, the Conservatives, so with sister parties across Europe, because it's across the water, it's our biggest ally, it's been our biggest strategic partner in economics and diplomacy alongside the US since the Second World War. So it's extraordinary that one wouldn't want to have stronger ties. The first thing, I think, is that, I'm a big supporter of Rishi Sunak's. I think that what he did with the Windsor Framework has started to enable us to repair some of the diplomatic relations which are important for getting those strategic. I've been struck by the number of diplomats I know in London who've said to me, that's enabling us to rebuild trust with you as a government. And that's really important. And there will be all sorts of things coming up. So the fact that it opens up those opportunities to look at how we want to have future trading opportunities as the world changes in tech, biotech, how we want to make sure that some of the tariff barriers are not as difficult as they could be, potentially even looking at some of the labelling systems that will allow goods to flow more quickly. That happens because you have trust between governments. So Sunak's achievement in the Windsor Framework is not just that was good for Northern Ireland and GB business. It actually has opened up the world again for UK.
I don't know if you can give me a yes or no answer on this, but do you think we'll ever rejoin the European Union?
I'm not interested in that. I've got too many scars from the past battle.
Me too.
Well, you and I together, but a lot of colleagues on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not for my political generation. Who's to say what the next political generation will do? But at the moment, we should be interested in creating closer relationships, better economic ties with them and the whole of the world. But we shouldn't have a Europe hole in our global Britain.
You have been campaigning for the rights of summer-born children so they can have a choice about which school year they go into. You've made a lot of progress on that. Not 100%, but you've certainly made big progress on that. Where next for that campaign? What's still left to do on that?
The reason why I'm sparked about it, you asked me earlier why I'm a Conservative. One of them is I believe in creating opportunity and aspiration for everybody. And it was very clear to me that the life chances of children, potentially, not everybody, but not every child, but a number of children born in the 3 months before September, which is the change of school date, were going to be their educational opportunities and educational chances slowed down if some of them needed a chance to mature into that first year. Some of them needed to stay with that cohort through, and some of them, when they got to secondary school, did. We've made huge progress. The government twice has now issued directives. The vast majority of local authorities are accepting that. I've had a long chat with the new minister last year, and we talked about the need potentially for legislation. At the moment, I am encouraged that directive is working, but I am concerned that as children move from primary to secondary sector, there are still some authorities that then choose to try and put people up straight into year 8 rather than year 7. And so I'm watching that very carefully, and that would be the next thing really to get a grip on.
You're 61 years old now. How long do you want to continue to serve?
Well, I'd like to continue to serve because I still think there are things to do. We spoke earlier about a few things that I'm still passionate about. I believe the world's a lot in politics about small victories. It's what you can achieve for your constituents, which change their lives at a very personal level. So there's a lot to do in that area. I think there's a lot to do in social housing. And also creating more housing opportunities so that everybody feel lots of people in London, certainly some number of my friends, don't feel that London's unaffordable, and it shouldn't be. We're a great capital city. I also want to do some work with my colleagues about re-establishing London as the great global city. And, I've been very fortunate to be a health minister and a transport minister. And I still think that we're going to see some great changes in those areas, and I want to be involved in that. But as you rightly know, I serve at the pleasure of my constituents, and I'm under no illusion that the next election is like every other election. I'm very lucky that I built my majority from minus 3,000 up to 12.5, and it's now 600. But I've always treated it the same. We always tried to do the best for our constituents. We've always tried to work hard, and we'll see what the next election brings.
Indeed, we will, Stephen Hammond. I didn't know you very well before today. Thanks very much for giving us an insight into your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.